Hi, welcome back. We're going to be talking now a little bit about why it's that popularity is so important, how come this is something that affecting us so much when we're young, and how come it's something we seem to kind of gravitate what's best of our lives. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. One thing I'm going to point out the idea that this has become really explicit. Have you ever noticed recently if you're on the web there's a lot of information about what's trending? Whether you are on Twitter or use just even looking at a news story or anything you see, you'll sometimes this is graphics that talk about how many times has a story been tweeted, or how many people have liked it on Facebook, or how many comments as this. And you find that's right at the top of the story. In fact, even after you're done reading the story, there's maybe zoned icons there again, encouraging you like you should do it about it. You should like it on Facebook. Why is that happening? We've kind of almost grown accustomed to it. I think one of the reasons why this is happening is because it's based on this fundamental premise that if you see that a lot of people really instinct in something, we will think somehow it's good, it's important. We want to do what everyone else is doing, even if we resist that idea and we think, no, I'm an individual, I don't just come from. Still, we're kind of a bit influenced by that. We think, well, if that's something that 3,000 other people have liked, then it must be something really important that I need to look at. It's the same thing when you watch a commercial and they say this is the number one movie at the box office. They really trying to pull on the idea that it's popular and therefore that means it's good. But why does that work so well? Why do we even care about the fact that everyone, everyone else is doing it? I mean, want to read the news stories that I think are of instinct to me, and I don't think my interests are going to be the same as 10,000 as people that read the same news story. So why what I automatically think that's important? It turns out that a lot of this might have to do with the ways that we developed as a species and ways that we can think about that we took a step way back and thought about this from an evolutionary perspective. So let's go back to the world of F. K. and cavewoman and really thought about what life was like at that time because that's how we develop the brain we have today. Even though that's a long time ago, that's not very long ago from the perspective of our biological development. So there are lots of ways that what happened back then still influencing as as today and it's still influencing how us brains work. How have you ever noticed how if you yawn then other people around you will yawn? Yawn's a kind of contagious or have you ever heard that way? Women live together in close quarters or spend a lot of time together. The menstrual styles will study synchronous. That all has to do with the same idea here, in the sense that when we were cave people a long time ago, that all has to do with the same idea here, in the sense that when we were cave people a long time ago, we quickly learned that we are going to do a lot better if we live together. And if we kind of pay attention to signals from each other. So if you think about it, if you went on your own, well, you you'd have a hard time getting food, right? And if you got food and you killed something like a giant wild beast or whatever, you're not going to be able to eat all of that all by yourself. So it's really information, and if you try to save the rest of it, it's going to spoil and you are going to get sick and die. In evolutionary use, you are going to be weeded out. So we really learn that when it comes to food. Same with safety, protecting one another, or when it comes to other ways of coordinating activities like one should we'll all go to sleep. That way we can all go to the next part of where a nomadic group. So that helps us get to the next part of where we're trying to move to. It It would be good if that vessel synchronized and we're in a hut and we later be hot. And the more you stay in the hut, the more you sleep when everyone sleeps. That's why we can all look together and move together at the same time. The more that everyone stops to give birth or to conceive new babies, that should all happen at the same time. We should all eat together. We should all protect each other. If you live in that hurt, then so things will be threatened. You won't get food. You won't be safe. You won't stop at the same times. At the other end, you might get kicked out. You might be alone. You might be unsafe, and that's no good for you. The people that did that, they were weeded out through natural selection. We are all the people that survived by learning to pay attention to what they heard that they say. It turns out that has had a really cool, indelible effect on how our brains are put together. But we just recently discovered this in ways that we kind of didn't even expect. So there have been a lot of researchers that have been interested in understanding how the brain works, and particularly there have been a lot of people that have looked at how the brain kind of lights up in an fMRI, let's say when we experience pain. So what I mean by that, there have been a lot of studying where they have asked people to lay down in fMRIs. They kind of laying there and they showed them screen over the head, and they give them an opportunity to experience some types of stimuli. Now, in some cases, there might be real life stimuli. So while the hands sticking out of the fMRI, that might get a little prick or some sort of painful stimulants, and when that happens, the fMRI what they light them to see what area is of the brain a kind of lighting up. And what we learned was very reliably for a very long time. We've seen in research that there are particular areas that tell us that where experience pain, and the areas that tell us it's time to start regulating this pain and doing something about it. How the parts of our brain that single pain it's really important be the pains are the wise of its brain's way of telling us something very serious is happening you need to do something about it. This is going to threaten a survival. So pains the kinds of the most powerful signal that our brains can give us to tell us that if we're going do something soon, we may die or our species may be in trouble. While an interesting thing happens, so there were some researchers, including Naomi Eisenberg from UCLA, who decided to do some studies looking at people in the fMRI machine in the magnet and that asked them to instead of getting real pain, they asked them to participate in some interactions where they were getting excluded by others. And why that this works, though sometimes were real people that folks were communicating with while they were in the magnet, and sometimes they were just pretend, but either way the experiments put it together so the person in the fMRI magnet thought that they were being excluded and that others were choosing not to interact with them. So in a wise it was kind of like that were getting a single lane you're getting kicked out of the herd. You're not part of the group anymore, getting excluded. It turns out they were very surprised to find that when people got the signal to say that they were getting excluding the parts of the brain that lit up were the parts of the brain that light up when we experience real physical pain. And this kinds of led to the idea that there might be something called social pain. We experience social exclusion in the exact same way that we experience physical pain. In fact, there's even a research to say that if you take a Tylenol, then that helps a social pain go down, just like it helps your physical pain go down. So maybe this is why even the why that we say it in English our language tends to mirror the idea of pain. We talk about heartbreak or homesickness. It's the idea that we experience physical symptoms from a social rejection experience, so it kind of suggests that the same way that the life of popularity makes us experience pain, and our brains telling us with its most powerful single, you need to do something about this. Don't get kicked out of the herd. Make sure that you are safe. It turns out that the same as the research also that has to do with our DNA that found that this is even more powerful than we even realized. But before we talk about that, I just have to tell you briefly about something that's really new, and it's the IDF. Epigenetics is really the sense that while we all have our DNA and every single cell in our bodies has DNA in its nucleus. That DNA not every gene turns on. Some genes turn on later and some genes never turn on. But what we've recently learned in epigenetics is that sometimes what makes those cells turn on certain DNA something that happens in our environment. So believe it or not, someone had walked in the room. They could say hello to you, or they could say something not pleasant to you that kind of rejects you, and that will actually affect what happens in your own self. And the reason why this is important because, as you probably know, many of our cells are dying every second, and your cells growing every second. So, if an experience happens to you now, the cells that will start growing 2 seconds from now are going to start relying on the DNA that was activated by what happened to you before. In fact, it's been suggested that every 6 months or so, we, as a person that's reactive to what happened to us, and so price sells about 6 months ago. So we constantly renewed people that are living through epigenetics based on what happened to us months before. It turns out our social experience having incredibly important impact on the DNA. And the DNA they often one has to do with our physical health. So again, let's think again about cave people. If you were a person that was living back in those times, one of the things that happened when you lived with others is you found that you got a lot of colds. And the reason why is because viruses spread from human to human. So as long as you're interacting with other people, your DNA activated to develop immunity to viruses, and all of the genes that help us to resist viruses uh, up regulating. In other words, the kinds of don't one. If you are part of a herd, there was much less of a chance that a dinosaur was going to come and eat your arm off. Therefore, you wouldn't have to have all of the inflammatory types of responses in your body to quick heal that bleeding limb and keep you the survived. You wouldn't need that kind of pro-inflammatory protection as much. Well, what happens uh, is is the minute we get rejected by other, we actually find that the genes that helps a recent virus become down regulating. In fact, you can take a blood test 40 minutes later and find that you can see the signs of that so quickly. Meanwhile, the inflammatory responses all up regulate. So, of course, if something happens to you for 1 minute a day, that doesn't mean you going to have an inflammatory disease necessarily. But if you experience chronic rejection over so much time, you experience wise of feeling that you are not part of the herd. You are not someone that is accepted and popularly. The over time yourselves we continually uh, develop this up regulated inflammatory response. So it turns out that popularity is actually changing the way that our DNA experience. This has major implication for health. And it turns out that there's a why that there has a feedback loop into our brains, and it even changes our mood and our experience too. And we'll talk about more of that later. So, in summary, it's important to remember that one of the reasons why we seem to care so much about popularity? Is it our species thought about being the healthier something we need for safety? And the minute that we lose popularity, our bodies preparing us for what will happen when we're kicked out of the herd, and our brains telling us with its most powerful single you needing to do something to fix this. Go back to either do what you can and be part of the group. And that's really important with the NA changing. This is all very addictive, but unfortunately, it's not really helpful for us today in the millennia that we live in now. You can go out for a fun walk on your own and not getting by a dinosaur. So unfortunately, our bodies are helping us in a way that would have been useful millions of years ago, but it's not necessarily helpful in today's society, and that some of the reasons why popularity plays such a huge role today. But it has effect on that anti and necessarily what we would have wished for.